Hello, friends from Five Reasons. The Miami Marlins are the hottest team in town. Everybody's talking about the Miami Marlins in the United States, and it's not because they have a positive record. It's because of all the positive tests that sadly have been reported during the day. Since the beginning of this day and this morning, we're joined today by David Fernandez to talk about this. We were talking about doing this live, and so much has changed from the beginning. It was around 9, 10 a.m. when we started talking, and now that we're live, it's 4:41. So many news and things going on and reports, and we know already about Miguel Rojas, and we know already that we're not playing in Baltimore, that the Washington Nationals don't want to play the Marlins either. David, how are you? How do you feel about all this? And what do you think is going to happen with the Miami Marlins now?
Alejandro, thanks for having me. I'm doing well. It's been a crazy day, obviously. I mean, as you said, we were talking this morning about getting on at that point to go over some of what's going on. But as the afternoon evolved, we've seen the number of players go up. We've seen the number of teams affected go up. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking about Baltimore, New York Yankees, the Phillies, the Nationals, Miami. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess. And obviously, it's not a great situation for the Marlins. You think first and foremost about these players and their families and all that's happening with them personally, and you wish them, nothing but the best in terms of health and luck and all of that. And then beyond that, just the ripple effect that this has had in the major league season, it's crazy. It's crazy. It makes you wonder, if this was the Yankees or the Dodgers, would we still be going forward with something like this? I mean,
Yes.
it's crazy.
Yeah, since it's maybe the less liked or less followed team right now in the United States, the Marlins, they're probably still trying to find a way to keep the show going, keep the things going. And and you were talking about health, right? And that was the first thing that crossed my mind when they reported the first case, even before the first game the Marlins played, because Jorge Alfaro was the first one
Yeah.
reported, and he couldn't play that day. But we saw him. Even the Marlins posted some pictures of him during batting practice, right there with all the players. And I was like, so if he's infected, all of them are probably infected also, because we all know, we've been hearing about this pandemic and in this coronavirus for months now. So we all know how easy it is for it to spread, right? So it was
Yeah.
surprising that they played one game. It was surprising that they played two games, and it was even more of a surprise that they played the third one after already four positives confirmed were reported. So, what happened there with MLB? You think they just looked the other way around and trying to, I don't know, uh, make it like it wasn't happening, or what happened there with the Marlins?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they might not have wanted to accept what was going on, because it was the Marlins, because it's the team that everybody assumes is going to end up in last place no matter what players we roll out there. Maybe they're thinking, let's just push forward. I know Mattingly was saying after the game on Sunday that, that they knew about the positive tests, and that not playing was never even really seriously considered at that point by the Marlins. The players wanted to play. The players discussed it amongst themselves, and they voted to play. The Phillies knew, and they voted to play. But the reality is, you wonder whether or not it should have been left up to the players. Should
Yeah, that
Major League
shouldn't be
Baseball have
a
stepped
decision,
in?
right? That should be MLB taking. You know what? It's a matter of safety of not just the two teams, but whoever else is going to play them for the rest of the season. So let's just stop this right now.
Right. No, absolutely. And the crazy thing is, there's talk about, where did they get it? Because they left Miami and nobody had any positive tests, right? And they went to Atlanta. Did they get it at Atlanta? Did they get it on the flight from Atlanta to Philadelphia? Did they get it in Philadelphia? Because supposedly, one of the visiting clubhouse attendants for the Phillies tested positive prior, and things like that. I mean, we're never going to know the answer to any of those questions. And the reality is, we don't know enough about the transmission of this virus to make any of those determinations, because the CDC says it takes 14 days in some cases for them to incubate. So, we've got players who are testing positive a day later, 2 days later, things like that. One report said that one of the new Marlins that tested positive has since tested negative, which,
Yes.
makes you wonder about the accuracy of the testing. Was it a true positive? Is it a true negative? I mean, we have no idea. And, they haven't reported any Phillies having tested positive since. But, who knows? They might start testing positive, in the middle of the week or next weekend or something. We have no idea. It's insane.
Yeah. And knowing all this, why was because last night Rob Manfred was in MLB Network and Tom Verducci interviewed him, and Manfred said we're looking forward to the Marlins playing on Wednesday against the Orioles. What was that about? Especially knowing what we just said, we all know we're all almost some sort of experts because we all know okay it takes 14 days, so we have to be careful. You have to quarantine. Why would the MLB commissioner say that? He was expecting the Marlins to play on Wednesday against the Orioles, knowing all the protocols and all the things that have to happen in order for a normal person to come back to normal life. And now, especially that you have some sort of a hotspot in the clubhouse. So why would he say that?
I have no idea. Like, to be completely honest with you, I have no good answer for that. I mean, Rob Manfred has botched this so completely. It's been such a mess. And it's ironic. I mean, what's happening in MLB in response to COVID, it's almost mirroring what's going on in the US. There's a lack of strong, clear guidance from above. And that lack of strong, clear guidance from above has resulted in reactive, like ad hoc measures, leading to inconsistency and confusion. Like, there's no way that he should have said what he said about Baltimore because the reality is this afternoon, MLB came out and said, no, the Marlins aren't going to Baltimore. In fact, the Yankees are going to Baltimore instead, and the Marlins have to wait, and they might get to play next week against the Phillies, of all teams, if you can believe it, in Miami. But then the mayor of Miami-Dade County, Carlos Jimenez, has since come out and said that the Marlins should follow the quarantine protocols when they return to South Florida, if they return to South Florida. So they would have to wait another 14 days, according to those protocols at that point, which, you're looking at 25% of the season.
Right.
And it's crazy. There's the fact that Manfred has said some of the things that he said and that he's left it up to the players. I mean, the statement that they put out earlier this afternoon talked about how they were aware of the positive tests on Sunday, which means they were okay with the Marlins and the Phillies deciding to play. That's terrible. That's terrible leadership. It's a lack of foresight. It's a lack of vision. I know people have talked about the bubble, how it wouldn't have worked for baseball, but I mean, it's clear that what they have right now, it's definitely not working. And only the Marlins are affected at this moment in time. But the reality is it could happen to any team at any point.
Yeah, and like you said, we don't know where they got it because when they were here in South Florida, they were all healthy. Nobody was reported as a positive back then. So everything was going fine. And something happened along the way and somebody just couldn't control himself, or I don't know what happened there, but somehow they got it, and we know how easy it is to just get it, even from the clubhouse, like you said, the one guy from the Phillies or whatever. It's just it's kind of random. It's out there and it can get you anytime. But the question is, what can MLB do, or what should they do with the Marlins? I mean, are they gonna quarantine for 14 days? Are they gonna, because they keep getting guys from waivers, so they're rebuilding the team somehow. They're putting it looks like they're gonna put somebody. We don't know who. It's gonna be a weird team that we're gonna be watching just wearing the Marlins colors, even next week or something, because they're just bringing. I think it's 4 already that they've claimed from waivers from different teams, and I just don't get it. What's gonna, because you said something that it's very important. They have no room in the calendar. It's like it's already a sprint as it is, and now with just these 2 or 4 games that they're already gonna miss, they're already gonna miss. It's gonna be hard for them to really come back and play the exact amount. And I read on Twitter that maybe not all the teams played all the games, and that they're gonna go about it with with winning percentages and all that. But it's gonna be weird. The Marlins play, I don't know, 40 games, and the rest of the teams play 60. That wouldn't
Right.
be fair for either one of the sides.
Yeah, no, listen, they're in an incredibly difficult situation. And the reality is, again, if this was the Yankees, if this was the Dodgers, I mean, if this was the Astros, if this was the Angels, teams that are headlining teams, they probably would be handling this very, very differently. I mean, Manfred has said that the only thing that would stop a team from playing or stop the season itself is if, the COVID outbreak renders a team completely non-competitive. And you mentioned it. The Marlins have made some roster moves here over the last couple days, with minor league free agents claiming guys off of waivers. I mean, if that's the case, they're gonna roll out a team that is not a major league team. I mean, one of the guys that they signed, Travis Snyder, he's an outfielder. He hasn't played in the major leagues since 2015. The other three guys that they picked up were all relief pitchers: Justin Schaefer, Josh D. Smith, and Mike Morin. None of those guys are, frontline players at any time. I mean, there's a reason why they were on waivers. There's a reason why these guys were being let go from their teams. I mean, we saw Josh Smith on the Marlins last year. He pitched 6 games with the Marlins in 2019 as a reliever, and he had an 8.31 ERA. He's not a great pitcher. I mean, is he somebody that's pitched in the major leagues before? So, the franchise has a certain level of confidence that he can kind of deal with major league, hitters and things like that. Yeah, there's that. He's got that experience. But the reality is the Marlins are going to really struggle to put together a roster that is representative of a major league club. And it'll be interesting to see if this, continues to grow. God forbid more players test positive. I know that they've gone through another round of testing as of this morning, and those results will probably come back this evening or tomorrow. If this continues to grow, then, we're dealing with literally a non-competitive team. We wouldn't be able to put out a roster, especially with, not wanting to dip into those prospects yet. I know the Marlins have a bunch of their frontline guys on the 60-man player pool, but why are you going to burn some of those service time, issues and situations?
That's the business side, right? Because that's why that's the reason why they did the 60-man roster, right? So in case something like this happened, maybe not, they weren't thinking about 17 players getting positives, but they were thinking that maybe 2 or 3 in each team were gonna go through this, and they had the taxi squad for that, and they had the 60-man roster, and everything was gonna be okay. But then you have the other side of it. Okay, you can bring whoever, one of the young guys, Monte Harrison, to come play for Harold Ramirez, and and maybe he deserves that spot. That's fine.
Right.
But then you're gonna start counting service years and all that, and then you get into the business side, and then you're affecting the Marlins organization somehow in 2 different ways. So it's a tough call there.
I know. And listen, the Marlins in this rebuild, this is year 3 of the rebuild. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't paying attention to the Marlins, but they really should be, because they have put together an exciting young group of prospects. And those guys will get to the majors here shortly over the course of the next 2 or 3 seasons. But the reality is they can't all come up at the same time, because the Marlins, from a business standpoint, as you said, they wouldn't be able to pay them all at the same time. We're a relatively small market team from that perspective. So for them, to pull up all of these players who they had judged to be not ready would be detrimental to their development. I mean, I know Sixto Sanchez is on the verge. I know Monte Harrison probably should have been with the opening day roster, but I mean, beyond that, I mean, they just drafted Max Meyer. Yeah, he's on the 60-man player pool, but I mean, he's brand new. Like, there's no way that he should be making his MLB debut this year, because baseball didn't anticipate this sort of outbreak. Now, I don't know that anybody could have, but there hopefully will be some sort of flexibility in how the Marlins are allowed to put their roster together. Maybe MLB and the MLBPA can come up with some sort of new rule which would allow the Marlins some sort of wiggle room. Maybe it has to do with service time and maybe not counting the service time. Maybe it has to do with not placing a guy on the 40-man roster. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what they would do, but the reality is this is a very unique situation. So the solution here is going to have to be equally unique from a competitive balance standpoint.
Right. Now, looking to the problem as if you are MLB. We saw it with MLS, how in the MLS is back tournament, they just kicked out two teams, Dallas, Nashville. They had just too many cases in their squads, in their rosters, and they just decided to leave the bubble or not even come to the bubble in Orlando, and that was it. And they just continued the tournament. And especially since the Marlins, like you said, it's not a team that makes the headlines all the time. It's we're just expecting to be one of the worst teams in either one of the divisions in the East. So it's not. It's definitely not the team that everybody's looking to watch. Let me see if the Marlins are playing to come and watch some baseball. Do you think MLB will just kick them out and you know what? See you next year.
Listen, they might. They might, because they've said, and part of the statement that they released this afternoon said specifically that over 6,400 tests have been conducted since July 24th, and no new positives have arrived from any of the other 29 clubs. So it's hard to imagine that MLB is going to shut down the entire season because of the one outbreak if it's contained within the Marlins itself. At that point, they'll have to, figure out what they're going to do with the schedule, and then maybe omit the Marlins. And, that could be a way forward for them. Obviously, that would be crushing for the Marlins as a franchise here and the development of these players and this roster. They were 2-1. They beat up on the Phillies, even knowing what they knew on Sunday. They weren't going to be a doormat. They weren't going to be a team that was going to lose 50 out of their 60 games. It wasn't going to happen. I know most people thought it would, and people were sort of taking the Marlins for granted, but there's real talent here, and they sort of deserve the ability to show that talent. So if MLB ultimately decides to kick them out in the way that MLS kicked out those teams, it would be incredibly disappointing. But I could see it happening, especially if the outbreak sort of stays just here in Miami.
Yeah, Rob Manfred was asked yesterday if he felt this was like a nightmare scenario, and he said no, it wasn't even close. But I think it probably was, because the Yankees were the very next team coming to Philadelphia, and they were hours away from going into that same locker room, same clubhouse, where the Marlins spent 3.5 days, because they got there right before the game on Thursday or Friday. I don't remember, but I mean, it was close. It was close to almost take out the most important team in baseball history.
I know.
As
Listen,
the Yankees. So it's
nightmare scenario. Yeah, when you have 15 out of 33 players test positive, that's a nightmare scenario. I don't care what team you're talking about. That's a nightmare scenario. 17 people involved in the traveling party have tested positive. That's a nightmare. And I don't understand what he's said or why he said some of the things that he said over the course of the last day or so. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it looks like he's just looking away from the problem, right? Like he's not actually thinking as a normal person would. And it's like, hey, we know the protocols. You need 14 days at least, and then test everybody and see who's healthy, and then somehow rearrange the schedule if it's possible. And if it's not, it's gonna be sad for the Marlins, but it's the best for the league, because the other option, and there was this rumor also, because Manfred can cancel or suspend the season, which was the other option. Do you think that that can happen? That could be an option in the future if maybe 2 or 3 teams go through whatever the Marlins are going through right now?
Yeah, listen, if if it continues to sort of grow from here, right? If we start to see Phillies players affected, I know there were reports coming out of Cincinnati that there were a handful of players that that were scratched, that maybe were showing potential symptoms. I know that maybe they didn't test positive, but they were pulling guys. Atlanta's catchers, were feeling some things earlier, but again, they didn't test positive. The reality is, if this kind of gets out of control, right, and it kind of goes to a few other teams, Manfred could just press pause. Maybe they could stop playing for 2 weeks and kind of quarantine everybody. Maybe they're not ready for a bubble, but a pause for 2 weeks could be a solution. But then again, you go back to the calendar part of it. Like, I know that they wanted to finish in October. They couldn't go too deep into winter because of the weather and things like that. So It gets incredibly complicated, obviously.
And it's gonna be hard already it's a namer, like you said. And for now, the Nationals don't want to come to Miami, and that's fine. But the problem is not Miami itself. It's just, it doesn't depend on the city. It's just the team that has so many positive cases. But for now,
Right.
that's what we know. That's what we have. It's probably going to change in the next couple of hours. So if you're watching this later, forgive us. But if you want to keep up to date with whatever's going on with the Marlins, you can visit 5reasonsports.com. David Fernandez is responsible. It's doing a great job there to keep everybody up to date, and it's a great website to visit. And since we are the ones here in Miami actually covering the team, it's good that you go by 5reasonsports.com and read what we have there. So thank you, David, for joining us today. And we're gonna do this more often. There you have the Twitter account for David if you want to follow him and keep up to date with everything that's going on with the Marlins. Sadly, bad news, and not the over 500 record that they had so far.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew.
All right. See you guys.